So you might be wondering why a botanist is telling you about bison. When I first went to the Kaibab Plateau in the late 70s, I was completely enthralled with the beauty of the meadows and the forests up there. It was love at first sight. When I went back to do this floristic work in the 2000s, the place had changed significantly, and I wanted to know why. And I realized pretty quickly that it was these beasts right here that made the difference. So if you go up to the North Rim now, what you see looks like a golf course. That's really different than it looked back in the 70s. But bison are pretty fabulous creatures. Who has seen a bison north of the Colorado River in Arizona? And who among these knows that it is this man that they owe that experience to? Not nearly so many. So you'll get a little bit of an education here. This talk obviously deviates significantly from the discussions that we've heard so far, which were about people. The main character in this talk is bison, which is the scientific name for what we think of as the American buffalo. And if you haven't experienced buffalo, and you're curious to know how one feels, you can come up later and touch Bernie. Bernie doesn't have a beating heart anymore, but he still kind of feels like a bison. Okay, here we go. The round circle.
Right side.
And is there a light on this thing?
Top of the circle is the laser.
Oh, okay. Aha, very good. So if you've seen bison up there, you know that this is just a fabulous experience to see them. To see American bison out there in the wild, it's tremendous. It's a vision out of the Old West. And you also probably know that we almost lost bison to extinction in the late 1800s. And the fellow that brought them to the Grand Canyon was partly responsible for that. He shot his share, but he is also responsible for helping to bring them back. These days, bison are no longer anywhere close to extinction. In the late 1800s, I think we were down to like 300 or 500 of them. Now there's about 500,000 bison in western North America. And each one of these circles represents the number of bison in each one of those populations. You can see that the circle for the Kaibab Plateau is right there, and that is 101 to 400 animals. But this is an old slide, and people are really bad at estimating population numbers. It's much more likely that the numbers are over 1,000. So I can't tell this story in 20 minutes. I really hope you'll read the proceedings. And I think you'll get interested enough to delve into this a little bit further. Anybody has any questions after this presentation, please come up and ask. So historians have postulated that bison, the history of bison on the Kaibab Plateau goes back into prehistory, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about the evidence for that and how they make those inferences. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the historic period, which is pretty muddled history. And then if time remains, I may go into the politics a little bit, though I'd prefer not to. So for this talk, we have to kind of define some terms here. Direct evidence supports the truth of an assertion without intervening inference. In other words, the evidence is found in the place where we're presuming that something happened or something existed. Indirect evidence infers that something happened or existed somewhere else. Also, we're talking about bison, not Pleistocene bison, which is Bison antiguus. Back in the Pleistocene, there were a lot of animals that lived around here that no longer do. And we're talking about the Kaibab Plateau specifically, not the region in general, the Colorado Plateau or Western North America or anything else. So where's the Kaibab Plateau? You can see that, You can see that this is the Kaibab Plateau here. This is Kaibab Plateau in the broader regional area. So the first evidence that I'm going to talk about is rock art depictions. I'm curious to know how many people in the audience have seen bison in rock art in the Southwest? Wow, a lot more than I expected would have. Now, how many have seen bighorn sheep depicted in a rock art panel in the Southwest? Many, many more. Okay, just to bring everybody up to speed, I'm going to show you what some of these images are like, because a lot of you are never going to see one of these in person. You can see that, oops, I want to say that this green area is the Kaibab Plateau. You can see the warm fire right here. Jacob Lake's right there. These numbers are the places where these rock art depictions are. None of them are on the Kaibab Plateau, so this is all indirect evidence of bison in the region. Okay, we'll quickly go through these rock art pictures. Here's our buddy Bob Dye, great historian from Kanab, looking at rock art depiction of a bison up near Kanab, Utah. You can see there's the hump, there's the tail, there's a beard. You can kind of see some horns, clearly a bison. This is in the House Rock Valley near the Condor release site. Again, you can see the hump, you can see the horns. Clearly that's a bison. Here's a much older one. This is near the Grandview Trail. And again, it's pretty clearly a bison based on the large head, the short legs, the hump. I don't know what those large things are there, but maybe those are artist license with the horns. These are not quite so clear, but if you look really closely, you can see there's a dark shape here, and there's a hump there. This one, same thing. This is on the Esplanade west of Thunder River. It's really exciting to be out in the Grand Canyon backcountry and find one of these things. This is the only one that I've personally seen, and this is on the north side of Fishtail Mesa, east of Kanab Creek. It's hard to tell, but there's actually two images of bison here. They're real dark. It's hard to say how old they are. Some people have, an archaeologist friend of mine has suggested that maybe these might be protohistoric, might even be from the early 1900s after bison were introduced to the area. And then this one is on the west side of Kanab Creek, below Kanab Point. Well, I should back up here just a second and make one more comment. So the trouble with rock art is you don't know if the depiction that you're seeing is indicative that the person was actually looking at the object that they were depicting at the time they were making the rock art. So nobody would say that because there's really beautiful paintings of Grand Canyon, Bruce Aiken's studio in Flagstaff, that he can look out his window and see the Grand Canyon, right? Ideas travel. Okay, Jeff Martin did a master's thesis on the issue of bison on the Colorado Plateau, and he came up with all these sites that are faunal remains of bison on the Colorado Plateau. You'll notice the Kaibab Plateau right here, there aren't any, and we're going to zero into that. So again, here's the Kaibab Plateau. Each one of these numbers represents some faunal remains. I'm going to tell you right now that these ones in red are faunal remains from the Pleistocene, so they're bison antiguus. They aren't really central to the thing that we're talking about right now. Number 46 and number 7 are places where Jeff determined that they were bison faunal remains, but in fact later on other people determined that they were not. They were probably cattle. At another site on the South Rim, bison fats were found on ceramics, and that was used as evidence that bison were in the area. But we also know that a lot of things end up in archaeological contexts that were not indicative of those things being there. For instance, coffee and chocolate are found in Chaco Canyon, but nobody would say that coffee or chocolate were being grown there. This is probably the most interesting one to me. It's at Furnace Flats. People found a femur, and they also found cranial fragments of a bison, which is a pretty good indicator that an entire bison ended up at Furnace Flats. And archaeologists are scratching their heads over that. They can't figure out how it got there. There were probably not herds of bison running around there. I think we'd find a lot more evidence that that was the case. In this case, being an old river runner and having seen cows floating down through Marble Canyon, having gotten flooded into the river, I'm pretty convinced that a bison flooded into the river, floated down, came into an eddy at Furnace Flats, and some local person said, "Ha, this looks pretty useful. I think I'll grab this." And they pulled it ashore, maybe ate parts of it, certainly used the bones for different tools. I don't know why the archaeologists haven't figured that out. So, into history. When's the first bison in northern Arizona? 1858, the Hedgepeth family was moving through the Midwest, coming into Arizona. They captured a bison calf, and they trailed it all the way out to California through Flagstaff. That's the first documentation of bison in northern Arizona. The next well-documented case of bison in northern Arizona is when Buffalo Jones and Jimmy Owens brought them into the House Rock Valley and the Kaibab Plateau. And their idea was partly to save bison from extinction. It was also partly to find a use for bison by mixing their genes with cattle, hoping that they would produce a super cow that would be really good to live in the House Rock Valley and could survive the harsh conditions there. So if you're interested in history, and I know you all are, and you have not read The Last of the Plainsmen by Zane Grey, or Lord of Beast, which is a biography of Buffalo Jones, you need to read these things. Do yourself a favor. They're fabulous stories. Buffalo Jones was an amazing man. He used to rope rope lions up on the Kaibab Plateau for fun. And he had so much fun doing it that he had to go to Africa and rope African lions, zebras, giraffes. Pretty amazing character. So here's Buffalo Jones there. During his experiment, you can see that he had some success mixing these genes up, and I think you can almost see the smile of pride on his face there and the twinkle in his eye. He was obviously a really fit man, really into what he was doing, amazing character. But after he introduced bison, he left. In 1909, he got out of the business and left it to Jimmy Owens, who kind of struggled on for a while. Interestingly, park superintendents used to ask Owens to bring bison up to places where there were tourists so that the tourists could see them. Because even at that time, the Park Service was confused about their mission statement, sometimes confusing it with the mission statement of a zoo. So here's some other bison that are obviously bison-cow mixes. So Owens lived up at Harvey Meadow for a while, and then in 1927 he was really sick of the business and he got out of it and he sold the bison herd to the state of Arizona. The Park Service wanted the bison herd, and I'm not sure if they made an offer or not, but certainly Stephen Mather dreamed of having this bison herd belong to Grand Canyon National Park. So I told you that the historic period is pretty muddled, and I'm not sure why, but there's a lot written about bison, but the stories are conflicting, the story is complicated. Bison were brought in, bison were hauled out of the region. Everybody has a little different story, and they don't really make sense. But here's a picture that I thought was really interesting, and it leads to a story that I don't know what the story is. If anybody knows it, I would love to hear about it. But he says, the headline for it is, the buffalo ousted from House Rock Valley by politicians were trailed over to Soap Creek for the hunt in 1951. So this is up near, up at Soap Creek, up, in the upper part of House Rock Valley. And obviously there's a bunch of bison and there's a bunch of cowboys herding them. That's about all I know about that. These days, this is how most people see bison on the Kaibab Plateau. One story that doesn't get out is how many times bison are interacting with vehicles up there. And I've heard stories that as many as 14 bison have been killed by vehicles, or at least encountering vehicles on the highway up there in a year. Steve Bridgehouse, who is here, who lives at the North Rim entrance station, told me last night that he says the numbers are way down, that they're not interacting with vehicles as much anymore. Apparently bison are learning something about vehicles. But here's an interesting thing is look how many adults there and how many juveniles and how many young bison are present. What does that tell you about population dynamics? So I guess we're getting into the political side of things, which is a scary realm for me to enter. But here's also a great way that people see bison up there. You can see this meadow is eaten down to a golf course appearance. The people there are really thrilled to see the bison. It's a sure, attractive thing. And the Park Service, which is selling tickets to this, great thing that we're looking at, is selling tickets for a lot of things that are attractive, and included in those things is bison. The Park Service has a very complicated relationship with bison, in one sense wanting to follow their mission statement and remove them as introduced species, and in the other case, wanting to have them around because they're such a great enticement for tourists. So what's happened in the last couple of decades with bison? Mostly, when I was spending a lot of time on the Kaibab Plateau, bison were spending their time to the west of the main highway that runs down to the North Rim. All these little dots are from telemetry that the Park Service has run on the bison, put a radio collar on the bison, and they run around and they collect all this data. And you can see that they're all west of the highway, or mostly west of the highway. What we don't see is that they're out here to the west on the Powell Plateau, which is where they tend to go during the wintertime to get away from the big snows. Things have changed because bison have sex. And there's a lot more bison now than there used to be even 10 years ago. So this is telemetry data that the Park Service produced from the year 2015. And so the area that we were looking at before is right here. And now they've had to expand their graphic out to include all of the Kaibab Plateau portion of Grand Canyon National Park. And you can see that bison are now spending lots of time down on the Walhalla Plateau. So the impacts that we saw to the west of the highway are now spreading throughout the Kaibab Plateau portion of Grand Canyon. Let's see, you don't really see it there, but anybody who's been out to the Powell Plateau can tell you that bison impacts out there are pretty significant. And they also, I'm not sure where Shiva Saddle is on this map, but they're going down at Shiva Saddle as well. I suspect other places, but those are the two places that I know of. I surmise that in another 10 years, we'll have bison sightings at the river. So I don't know if you know the story about the deer eruptions in the early 1900s, but people thought the best way to have a wildlife management area was to kill off all the predators, and then the deer would be doing really good, right? We wouldn't have these nasty mountain lions killing deer. Well, what happened is we had huge overpopulation of deer, and we started seeing the first signs of it, and then the bureaucrats didn't do anything about it. They didn't bring the mountain lions back, but some years went by, and Aldo Leopold, the great conservationist, has this quote. He says, "The period of 6 years between the first warning and the final catastrophe was consumed in debate and litigation." And so the bison on the Kaibab Plateau started spending a lot of time there in the mid-1990s. It is about 25 years later, and I wonder what Aldo would have to say about the current situation. I said the Park Service relationship is complicated. Part of it is because they have this bison emblem on their patch, which was never meant to depict a bison. It was meant to symbolize wildlife conservation in general throughout the parks. And I think that's my last slide. I'm down to 30 seconds. Yay. Thank you.